Dad Board Games. My name is Dos De La Rosa, and this video I will be doing a Theosis rules overview. The first part of this video is going to be a general overview of the rules for Theosis. It should go by pretty quick, and I'll let you know when I'm done. Afterwards, stay tuned. I will be going into a little bit more detail of the rules of the game because they can be a little bit complicated, and it's not especially helpful when the rule book itself isn't set up in an organized way as far as the game flow itself. So here we go. All right, guys, let's get into this rule book. First things, it's gonna go over a little bit of lore. You're gonna get your table of contents, and then your components list. Real important. It's gonna let you know how many ritual cards you have and all the different type of power cards you have. So this is just, in general, the setup of the rule book. So it's not going to be set up in the flow of gaming. First things to note, during the game setup, it's going to explain to you how to set up the Hierapolis board. You go ahead and get that done. But one of the very first things you're going to want to do when you want to play this game is you're going to want to figure out what type of game mode you want to play. Now, this doesn't actually get until about the 20s page number. But the reason why you're going to want to talk about what game mode you're going to want to play is because depending on the game mode, there's going to be very different rules as far as what type of characters you're going to choose, and it's going to affect what type of power cards you can get. So just keep that in mind. You're going to want to figure out what game mode you're going to play. So let's go ahead and jump to that part, and I'll go ahead and explain to you the proper flow of what you should be looking at first. All right, so here on page 20, you have a quick overview of the game modes. Now there's 3 game modes. There is solo, co-op, and then the way this game was originally intended to play, which is the competitive mode. And the competitive mode is going to be this here, player versus player, and there's variants to that. There's a normal 2, 3, or 4 player, there's a blitz 2, 3, or 4 player, and then there's a 5 and 6 player variant to that. So keep that in mind. That is the original version that I'm aware of. Now there's a team versus team, which is going to be similar to the way the player versus player is, except you're going to have teams of players with teams of heroes that are going to be grouping together in order to defeat other teams. And again, you're going to have different variants, and it'll explain all of that right under there. And all of a sudden it just jumps into light semi-co-op mode and heavy semi-co-op mode, and it doesn't really explain anything about co-op mode. So up here on the top, it's going to let you know what those co-op modes mean, and it's a very quick overview, but it doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty, so keep that in mind. The very next page is where you're really going to want to figure out what to do. So these top 3 is solo mode, 1 player. That's it. That's what you're getting for solo mode. That's what I've been playing, so there's where you're going to get the information as far as what to do. Then further down, it explains to you what to do for the cooperative mode. There is no other information for the competitive game mode. In the competitive game mode, you're not going to be playing against monsters, so you don't have to worry about this section. Back to the player versus player mode, the original competitive mode, you're going to set up everything the way it's supposed to be, and eventually you'll get to the arena, and we'll go ahead and figure out what the differences between co-op and the competitive mode are right now. In the co-op mode, you're going to be basically fighting a monster, and the monster is going to have different stamina tokens, which is going to be explained in this game mode. It'll tell you where and what stamina tokens you have and how many monsters you're going to be fighting. And also in the solo mode, it's going to be the same thing. It'll explain to you how many monsters you can fight, which is only 1, because the game is really hard with 1 monster, and then how many stamina tokens you're going to have per the amount of heroes that you're deciding to fight with. So if you're going to decide to play in the regular competitive version of the game, and that's what you're deciding to do, then you're going to go ahead and set up the game just like normal. You start at the very beginning. You're going to go ahead and set up your Hieropolis board, and you're going to move on to setting up the player boards. One thing that they omitted from the rulebook that you are going to need to be aware of is that every hero is going to start with 3 gold. So take a note of that. That is something that you're going to have to remember. It is not in the rulebook. So everybody starts with 3 gold, and that's every hero for every player. So, and that goes for every single game mode. Now, after you've set up the Hieropolis board, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to set up the game mat. You're going to ignore the arena board setup. That is for later. So you're going to set up this game board again. Make sure you get your 3 gold. And then after that, it goes into powers control. Don't worry about all of this. Worry about weapons and armor. This equipping weapons and armor is going to talk about your artifacts, and it's going to talk about your market and what happens when you pick up a weapon. So very important for you to know that part. You go ahead and equip your weapons, and that's what you do. Now, during this, you're going to want to select the hero locations. Now, my understanding is in competitive mode, every single player gets their turn, and everybody puts 1 hero into the gold section at the bottom of the board. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. Yes. So these right here, you're going to put a hero in here, and everybody gets their first turn, gets to draft one of the cards, which is going to be one of these quests. You're going to gain the loot and the actions that you get from that quest, and then you're going to move the marker here, which the rulebook says is clear, but is actually a yellow. It says it's a clear white, but it's actually a clear yellow marker. At least that's what came in my game board. I'm not sure if everybody else got the same thing. So very important. Look through this section here. It's going to detail all the different sections of Hieropolis, and it's also going to explain what to do if you decide to use the non-gold sections, which is basically just being able to move the marker in any direction you want. After everybody's done drafting and after your 6th turn, then you're going to want to go into the preparation phase. This here tells you exactly how to set up the gold that you're going to get at the end of the Hieropolis phase in order to figure out what your initiative track is going to look like, or what they call the rank track, which is going to be at the bottom of the arena board, and I'll show you here in a second. So this is pretty straightforward. There's not a lot that you need to worry about. Follow the steps and you should be good to go. After you're done making sure everybody gets their gold and you have established what the initiative is going to look like, you're going to remove the Hieropolis board. Once you remove the Hieropolis board, then you continue with the game setup of the arena board. Now, it's going to explain also how to win the game, which is great. You're going to know how to win the game. And after that, you're going to want to figure out your powers and items. Now, again, I'm not going to get into super details until later, and I'll let you know what's going on with all the powers and all that. Next, you're want to figure out the combat phase. So here's where it explains how to enter the arena, all the actions you can take, the power management, and how the combat turns work, and also how the ranking system works. Also, once you're done with the combat phase, you're also going to want to know about range. You're going to want to know about attack and defense, and any type of resistances and how damage is calculated. So that is that. That part right there should get you through most of the game. So just again, a quick review. It's going to be Hieropolis board setup, which is at the beginning, right here. So you're going to go Hieropolis board setup, hero mat setup, add the 3 gold that they omitted from the rules, and then when you're done with all of that, you go to assigning heroes to locations for the preparation phase. You have all your quests and your locations so that you know what everything does. After you're done, then it's going to go through the 3 steps of completing that phase, and you go to the arena board setup, where you set up the arena board after you remove the Heropolis board. And once you're done with that, then you're going to want to come over here and do the combat phase. So again, once you're in the combat phase, it's going to tell you how to enter the arena, what your hero actions are, and it's going to explain combat up until the end. Now, very neat thing about the rule book, which I think this was done very well, is in the very back you're going to have an appendix of the powers, which is super important also when you're setting up the game in case you cannot tell what the differences between all the different powers are. So it's going to tell you which of the 6 cards go into that deck, and it's also going to explain a little bit about the powers and what they do. And another thing we're going to note, guys, is one of these cards, I think is called Confusion, was incorrect on the card itself. So if I can find it real quick, I don't remember which one of the cards stacks it goes into, but it is this one right here. It shows 4-2, but I believe it's supposed to be 2-2. So remember that, guys. I think that one's the card. Check online on the Board Game Geek website. That is written down somewhere, and I'll try to put the link in the description below. So check that out and make sure that that gets looked at. Another thing you're going to want to look at too is you got all the skills that your heroes have. So if you have any questions about that, you're going to have that information here. But generally, you just follow whatever's on the player board. It's got it all written down, so there's nothing you need to worry about when it comes to that. Okay, that does it for my general overview of the rulebook for Theosis. You are free to go ahead and just stop this video now. I have gone basically over all of the general rules. There's really not much more I can say. Go on and have fun. However, I am going to go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty now, and I'm really going to try and dig into this rule book. There is a lot of questions and a lot of different things that can become complicated, and I'm going to go ahead and explain a lot of that stuff here right now. So if you want to go ahead and watch this, go for it. So here we go. All right, first thing I'm going to get into is if you decide you're playing co-op or solo, very important that you realize this. Your Deceitful Quest and your Thieves Guild is going to be unavailable unless you're playing every hero. Okay? Now, that applies to co-op only. In solo mode, it is guaranteed that you will not be able to use the Deceitful Quests or the Thieves Guild. Let me go ahead and get the board over here so I can explain this a little bit better. All right, guys. So if you look in the rule book on page 21, it's going to give you how to prepare for the co-op and solo game modes. It's going to explain to you that if you have 3 characters left over or more, that you're going to go ahead and set up those characters in 2 different sections for sure, which is going to feed this Deceitful Quest. So if you like this character or this character, you will not be able to play them in cooperative. Unless you have enough people to choose all the heroes, this is not something that you're going to be able to play. Number 1, you won't be able to do the Deceitful Quest because that is something that is predetermined by the AI. And the way it's explained is it's supposed to cause grief for the solo or cooperative players at the very end of all their turns. So if you have in solo mode, I usually play with the 4 heroes. At the very end of all of my 4 heroes' turn, somebody is going to get 3 gold stolen from them, and then somebody is going to go to the Thieves Guild and do any one of these dice rolls, and then after that, you get one of 2 options. The 3rd evil hero is going to be able to do the Vengeful Quest if it hasn't already been done, or they're going to go straight to the market that's under here and take the highest weapon that is available. Now, I'm not really sure exactly why that's necessary at the very end of the turns, because there really isn't anybody else that can take another turn. So I'm kind of confused about that. However, let me know in the comments. I'm not really sure if there's anything different that might be happening, but I don't really play with any of these 2. So for me, there's usually 2 of these right here. Also, you're gonna have to be very, very careful when you're picking out which types of cards you have. Since you're playing a monster that has these stamina tokens right here, these stamina tokens are random and they have lots of resistances, and they have many, many ways of stopping you from damaging anything. So go through it a couple of times. It's going to take a little bit for you to get, you know, a good understanding of how the monsters work, but it is possible, and we'll go ahead and go through that. So let me get ahead and get to the second thing that was really confusing for me. Combat. That was a little difficult to follow. Again, I really wish this rulebook was a little bit more organized, but it's okay. Now that I understand how combat works, I'm going to go ahead and explain it to you guys. So, 2 phases to combat. Number 1, your attack and your defend. So, in order to play that, we're going to go ahead and take a look at 2 different cards. So, here is an attack card, and here's a defense card. Both of these would cancel each other out. So, as combat goes, you would play one card, somebody plays the other one, they're all face down, you flip them over, and then you calculate attack and defense. That's the very first phase of combat, attack and defense. Now, things you're going to want to look at is your equipment and your armor. Now, regular equipment and armor don't have any modifiers, but artifacts such as this one and certain armors are going to have a +1 or more up at the top. That is an attack modifier. You're going to use this to modify your attack. So if I apply this to the hero that is attacking, then he's going to get a +1, and that 4 turns into 5. Now, the very next thing you're going to want to do is figure out if the attack is going to land. And that's the second phase of the combat. So since this person only has a 4, and I'm assuming they're going to have no artifact armor that gives them any modifiers, it's going to be a hit. So now you have to calculate damage. You're going to take whatever's left over of your attack, which would be 1, and you're going to add it to whatever number you have on your item right here. So that's a 3. So that's going to be 1 plus 3, and that's going to be a total of 4 damage. That's all that went through. Not a big deal. Now you're going to have to determine whether it has an effect, which would be the type. So here is a symbol on the very top. That symbol right there means fire. All the different symbols are in the rule book, so you'll be able to look at them at a glance. So this is a fire. If I would have had an artifact with no symbol down at the bottom, it would have to be fire, because anything that's physical gets trumped by these signs. But since this artifact has a light symbol on there, I can pick either or. So I can pick fire damage, or I can pick lightning damage. That's it. There's no more. That's how you calculate damage. Very last step in phase 2 is to figure out if there is any effects at the bottom, which there usually is. Typically, you're going to have an effect down there. This one says deal double weapon damage if you destroy an armor or shield, but we're not doing any of that. We don't have armor or shield, and it's going to be the same thing for defense. This one says heroes heal 4, but that's a spell. You can't use that. This spell has to be activated on your turn, and for the moment, they'd only be using this number 4 down at the bottom. All right, now what about if it doesn't have spell or curse on it? Let's take this card for an example. This one says physical, void, and ice damage is negated. That applies. That is something that is 100% viable during combat. There is no other precursor to it. There's no curse, there's no spell, there's no blessing on top. So that plays during the game. You have to be very careful when playing these types of cards to make sure that you are playing it correctly. This thing is going to give a player a blessing, and it's any player of your choice. It's not the player that plays this, but you can place it on any player of your choice. That's one of the rules of being able to play this. You play this face down, and then once it flips over, that blessing goes into effect. Same thing with curses. Once that curse hits, which it should say it has to hit, which means the attack has to be over the defense, that will activate the curse. And spells are basically played face up, and you just follow whatever's on the card. All right, now what if you play one of these skills? Now, if you look at these skills right here, none of these have any indication that they change or modify any of the attacks except for this attack +1. So again, first stage is attack, second stage is damage. So this one would give you a +1, just like the artifact, on attack. If your hero happens to have an attack or a skill here that has a little symbol there that references, it would be considered using that power instead of one of the cards. So if you have, for example, again, this fire card right here, you're going to end up ignoring the symbol and ignoring any text on this card, and you're going to go straight with whatever is on the skill. You cannot use both. You have to either use the skill power or you have to use the card power. You can't use both. So only the numbers would apply. So again, just a quick review. Attack and defend, two different sets of numbers. Now, remember, your damage is going to be the bottom number. Artifacts will have an attack modifier on the top. Your defense is going to be the same. For the exception of, I forgot to go over this. Your defense, when you have armor, these symbols here is your resistance. And basically the only way you have to see this is you either have 100% resistance or 50% resistance. And the color on here is pretty noticeable. Gray is going to be the physical resistance, red is going to be fire, blue is going to be ice, yellow is going to be lightning, and then green is acid, which is for the monsters, and then you'll have purple, which is void, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Anything that you get that is damage and you have the 50% resistance, you half whatever that is, and then you round down if you have a decimal. So always round down on your resistances. And that's combat. Now, I play solo a lot, so I want to go ahead and go over a little bit of the caveats for solo and some of the difficulties of having to play a solo game without being too up on the rules. So stay tuned for a second. If you're playing solo, you're going to have to play against a monster. So again, you're going to have the solo rule set right here. It gives you 1 player, 4 heroes, fight 1 monster with 7 stamina tokens. These are the stamina tokens right here. You get to do pick them at random. So you flip them over. You go ahead and do whatever you want to do to get those nice and shuffled, and then you pick 7 of them and you're done. And then you're going to have to reference the monsters and how they move. Now, there is a typo here. There's monster defense right here, and then you're going to have monster defense again. That's incorrect. This one here, the first section is actually the defense of the monster. The second part is the offensive part of the monster, and it's going to tell you how it selects targets, how it attacks, and like what the order of selection is going to be. So basically all the rule is going to say is you try to pick the target that's going to be most beneficial for the monster and less beneficial for you. So anybody that's familiar with games like Kingdom Death Monster or any other big, huge game that's going to be hard, like Deep Madness or anything like that, knows that you kind of just go with what's going to be worse for you, and that's how it is. But in case you can't, there is 4 little blips there that'll tell you what to do. All right, these are the monster cards, quote unquote. And this is going to be what you reference whenever you fight a monster. But whenever you attack and it's your turn, you're going to end up rolling this dice right here. And then you're going to do whatever one of these that there is. Now, monsters can do 1 attack that is kind of special, which it took me a little bit to figure out what you could do. So when you see at the bottom here 6 acid damage, if you get hit by 1, it's over. You're going to get 6 acid damage no matter what. And that is, again, it is selective to monsters. There is no other player that'll have that type of damage. So be aware of that. That's the impression that I got. Leave me a comment. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. That's what I understood from the rules. I'm not really sure if that's right or not. So hopefully someone out there knows exactly if that's exactly what it is, or that's what it's supposed to be. So that is all I got for right now. As far as I'm concerned, everything else in the rule book is in there. Like all the information you need for how to do everything is in the rule book. It's just not organized in a very neat fashion. So, you know, read the rule book really good, follow the steps, the organized steps, so that you can get through quickly. And it should only take you about 15 to 20 minutes to get all the board on, all the board off, you know, all that other in-between maintenance time that you're going to have. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. I thank you very much. If you haven't yet, subscribe. I'm going to be putting down a couple more videos, maybe even a playthrough of Theosis, a solo playthrough, and then I got a couple of more videos coming out. And I also just received my Deep Madness Kickstarter game with all and every expansion and everything else that comes with it. So I'll be doing an unboxing for that soon. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you get on board.